Hi everyone, I hope you've all had a great week so far, and I'm just going to go ahead and apologize. I'm a little under the weather, so if I sound a little different or weird, that's probably why. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the second section of the book that's all about racism. To begin, I will mention some of the concepts that stood out to me, what role I think white privilege plays in higher education, and then lastly, what other topics or things stood out to me as well. So, I believe racism is a topic that can get very uncomfortable or intimidating to some people, but I also believe it's important to know how to have those open, honest conversations, especially in settings like this, where we're all working towards the same goal, we're all respectful of each other's opinions, experiences, and beliefs. And I believe racism is one of those topics where some people can get the different perspectives and stories that other people have, and it can help them grow in their own learning and their own self, learning about them. And it's a very real thing that affects people of all cultures and races on a daily basis. I really enjoyed how the section of the book started by mentioning Barack Obama and how his being the first African American to be elected as president was a monumentous experience and achievement for marginalized groups. It's no lie that America was primarily white men who ran the country and made decisions. And so having this major change in America definitely gave a lot of people hope and a belief that things were changing. The first concept that stood out to me was the section under racial identities, racial hierarchies, and white supremacy. It talks about the one drop rule, and I don't ever remember learning about this, so it was definitely interesting for me to read about. Slavery was obviously a big deal in America and tore our country apart, and the fact that certain individuals would go so far to separate people just because of a slight family bloodline shows just how deeply their hatred and animosity ran. It was just amazing to read about. Secondly, defining racism, this section stood out to me. The author mentions how at young ages we're introduced to misinformation about others who don't look like us or don't act like us. This is a sad fact where our environmental influences can impact how we think or act in certain situations and how we grow up. For example, someone who grew up with their parents or grandparents who continuously talk negatively about a certain marginalized group can then in return reflect those same beliefs as they grow up. This kind of reflects a social work theory called person in environment. Next, white privilege is a very real thing. I am a white female, and I 100% know that there are some things that I might not have control over that are a very real fact just because of how I look. I mentioned in my first reflection video that I had a social work class that introduced me to the well-known article that the author actually mentions in the book. On page 66, he talks about the white privilege unpacking the invisible knapsack. If you want to learn more about yourself and learn about what privileges you may or may not have, I highly suggest you look up that article. It's very eye-opening, and it actually points out things that I had never noticed before reading it, and it definitely gave me a deeper look at myself. I believe white privilege does play a role in higher education because it literally has an effect in everyday life. Just walking into a department store reflects our privilege. One aspect of white privilege's role in higher education includes the racial identities of our educators. In my undergrad, there was a huge discussion about how many of the educators around us were primarily white males. According to a U.S. news article, while the number of minority students entering higher education institutions is growing, they are more likely to attend underfunded institutions, while white students are concentrated in more selective universities. One reason for this is that many minority students have not been given the resources and aid that they need to be prepared for college. But I believe in today's college system, there are many, many resources and services available for all students alike to take advantage of to further themselves and prepare to be productive citizens. But white privilege is a very real thing. Other things that stood out while reading the sections was symbolic racism. I believe this happens very frequently by people who may not even understand why or how their actions are deemed as being racist. Examples of this include Halloween costumes that reflect certain cultures, like dressing as Indians, and even mascots at football games. While those individuals are having a good time rooting on their teams or walking around in a headdress during Halloween, they are actually being very disrespectful and racist to others whose lives, cultures, and heritage are being reflected. I think that education is key and needs to be constantly reiterated that it's not okay to just wear a headdress just because you want to stand out for Halloween. That's someone else's culture that you're appropriating. There are many, many concepts that interested me and I wanted to speak about, but time just did not permit it. Clearly, I'm no expert, but tried to speak from my heart and my beliefs about what I've learned. I am a white female, born into this world with privileges and advantages that I did not ask for. But the best thing I can do is realize what those are, understand those privileges, and work to be an advocate for those who are disadvantaged while working alongside others to try to change and make something better of our country, because it has made such a lasting impact on our country so far. The only thing we can do is try to work to fix it and take on that responsibility. Because even while we aren't the culprit, we still have the responsibility to help clean it up. I can't wait to hear what you guys have to say, and I look forward to it.